Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd, your provider of belief on demand.
Today we are acting as your lead architects. Our mission is, well, to transmute the text The Great Effects of Small Things by Douglas Collins into a briefing on what you could call the weaponization of the tiny.
I have to be honest with you, when I first saw the title for this deep dive, my mind immediately went to nanotechnology, or maybe something about chaos theory, the butterfly effect.
Sure, that makes sense. The Great Effects of Small Things. It sounds very scientific.
Exactly. But then I started reading, and I realized pretty quickly we're in a completely different universe. I mean, this is dense, critical theory. It's heavy philosophy. And it opens with a statement that quite literally made me put my tablet down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
It's a confrontational text, isn't it? It doesn't ease you in.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It throws you right in the deep end. It starts with this quote from Andre Malraux, and it's about a specific way of seeing the world. And the quote is, "The trembling of a branch against the sky is more important than Hitler."
The trembling of a branch against the sky is more important than Hitler.
I just want to pause on that, because on the surface, that sounds, well, it sounds insane. And frankly, it borders on offensive. Hitler is, the architect of the Holocaust, a figure of such massive, horrific historical weight.
The absolute epitome of evil in the 20th century.
Right. And a branch is just, it's a piece of wood. It's barely anything. So to claim the branch is more important, it feels like kind of moral abdication. Like you're just deciding to ignore evil to go look at pretty nature scenes.
And that's exactly the reaction the text wants to provoke. It's a violent juxtaposition on purpose. It forces you to question what important even means. Malraux and Collins, the author, they aren't talking about historical impact in the way a history book would.
Okay, so they're not weighing lives against leaves.
Not at all. They're talking about something more abstract. They're talking about what the text calls the infinite invasion of history versus the, let's say, the sanctity of the present moment.
The infinite invasion of history. That's a powerful phrase. So if we're going to spend the next hour on this, I need to understand why a twig gets to hold the moral high ground over a dictator.
Okay, so it all comes down to this central conflict, the whole versus the fragment. Hitler represents the ultimate terrifying form of the whole.
What do you mean by the whole?
The totalitarian state, the grand narrative, the single unifying idea that everything, every person, every resource, every single moment must be conscripted into one giant marching purpose. That's bigness. That's what the text calls greatness.
The branch.
The branch is just a detail. It's a fragment. It's just trembling. It's not trying to go anywhere. It's not trying to conquer the sky. It's just brushing up against it. It has no agenda, no grand plan.
So it's innocent.
Exactly. Because it has no agenda, because it is small and disconnected from any grand purpose, it's the only thing that remains innocent.
So the argument then is that greatness itself is the crime. The ambition to be the whole is where the poison lies.
Precisely. And that brings us right to the first major section of our briefing, the existential friction, the why now of it all. The text identifies this specific crisis in Western thought, which is the slow, dawning realization that unity and the whole are inherently violent concepts.
That is a very hard pill to swallow. I mean, we're raised on the ideal of unity, e pluribus unum. Out of many, one. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves.
Of course.
We build monuments.
Yeah.
We want our lives to have a grand arc, a purpose. Is this text telling us that that fundamental human desire is wrong?
It would say it's dangerous, very dangerous. The text leans heavily on the philosopher Theodor Adorno, who was writing in the shadow of World War II, and there's a line from him in the source material that is just haunting. He says, "Greatness is the guilt that works bare."
Greatness is the guilt that works bare. Wow.
Think about it. Think about the pyramids. They are great. They are monumental. They represent the whole of a civilization's power. But what did it take to build them?
Suffering, slavery, untold numbers of lives.
Exactly. The greatness of the object is built on the crushed lives of the many. The text argues that anytime you try to create a total system, whether it's a massive empire, a comprehensive philosophy, or even, say, the great American novel, you have to use force. You have to crush the details that don't fit your grand vision.
You have to smooth out the rough edges.
And those rough edges are usually people, their lives, their quirks, their inconvenient realities.
So the friction here, the thing that should make us uncomfortable, is the realization that if I want to be a great man or build a great company, I'm essentially signing up to be a villain in this story.
You're signing up to be an agent of what the text calls mutilation. That's the word it uses. You are mutilating reality to make it fit your vision. And this brings us to the agagonist, which is a fantastic term.
Yeah, not the antagonist, the agagonist.
It's the default setting we're fighting against. The enemy in this text isn't a person like a specific CEO or politician. It's our own deep-seated obsession with monumentality.
The desire to be big.
The desire to be one, to be whole. Collins breaks this down by using Adorno's comparison of the American view versus the French view. And I have to say, Adorno does not pull his punches when it comes to the American landscape.
No, he really doesn't. I marked this section because it felt like a personal attack on my last road trip. He calls the American landscape a mocking fun.
Yes, a mocking fun.
What on earth does that even mean?
Adorno's arguing that in America, nothing is allowed to just be itself. Everything is deputized by the larger concept of America. You don't just see a tree, you see a tree in a national park.
Right. It have to serve the bigger brand.
Exactly. You don't just see a local diner, you see the spirit of Route 66. Even the smallest, most isolated segment is immediately inscribed with the immensity of the whole country. Everything points back to the great story.
It's branding. The entire country is branded by the empire, in a way. The big swallows the small.
That is the agagonist, the hefty object, the great story that demands sacrifice. If you're a small business in that system, you're just a microcosm of the big economy. You aren't a refuge from it. You're a franchise of it.
And the French instinct, according to Adorno.
Well, according to this analysis, the French instinct, or at least the instinct of the writers Collins is studying, like Proust or Malraux, is the instinct against that kind of integral, all-consuming form. They want to break things. They want to find the fragments that refuse to be glued back together into a coherent whole.
But why? Is it just nihilism? Is it just, let's break stuff because we hate structure?
No, the text argues it's a strategy for survival, and this is where we get to the stakes. Why should you, our listener, who might just be trying to get through your workday, care about any of this?
Yeah, what's the cost of ignoring this?
The text argues that the cost of chasing bigness is your soul, and potentially your life.
Okay, that sounds dramatic.
It is dramatic, but look at history. Look at the so-called great men. Alexander, Caesar, Napoleon. What happens to them?
Well, they usually die violently, or they go mad, or they're exiled. It rarely ends well.
And they cause massive amounts of death around them. The text brings up Hegel's concept of the negativity cycle. The master, the big figure, appears blazing on the historical stage. But because he is the master, he immediately becomes a target. He provokes the slave, or the many, to rise up against him.
It's an endless cycle of violence.
It's a cycle of blood. The text calls it the blood debt of history.
So if you stand up on the deck of the ship and shout, "I am the captain now," you are, in effect, painting a giant target on your back.
You are, and you're also implicitly agreeing to the violence required to stay the captain. The text suggests the only way to avoid paying that blood debt is to not be the captain in the first place.
It's to be the branch, not the dictator.
It's to be so small that history literally can't find you. If you're not on the map, you can't be invaded.
It's a stealth strategy, a kind of existential camouflage.
It's a bunker. That's the key shift. We need to look at the small, not as something cute or quaint, like a puppy or a miniature train set, but as a strategic bunker against the violence of the world.
That pivots us perfectly into the second part of our briefing, the conceptual blueprint. Because if we accept this premise that big equals dangerous and small equals safe, we need to understand the mechanics. How do you actually be small? It's not as simple as just slouching or thinking small thoughts, is it?
No, it requires a fundamental cognitive shift, a real pivot in perspective. The text says we have to move from viewing details as a resource to viewing them as a refuge.
Okay, let's break that down. Resource versus refuge.
All right, think about how we're trained to engage with the world, how we read a book or watch a movie or analyze a data set at work. We look for the key takeaways. We look for clues that help us solve the puzzle.
Right. If I'm reading a Sherlock Holmes story, I'm looking at the details, the cigarette ash, the scuff on the shoe, the broken clock, but only because they help me understand the whole. They help me solve the crime.
Exactly. In that model, the detail is a resource. It serves the big picture. It has a job to do. But this philosophy, this text, demands we flip that entirely. We need to look at the detail specifically to stop seeing the big picture. The detail becomes a blockade.
A blockade. So I look at the cigarette ash, and I just stay with the ash. I don't follow the clues.
You stay with the ash. You meditate on the ash. You refuse to let it lead you to the murderer. You refuse to let it become part of a larger, violent story. You let it just be a pile of gray dust, with no purpose beyond its own existence.
There's a specific example in the text that illustrates this so beautifully, and it involves the writer Marcel Proust. Now, I have to confess, I haven't read In Search of Lost Time because, well, it's 7 volumes long and I have a life.
A very common and understandable confession.
But the text zeroes in on this one character named Bergat.
Yes, the death of Bergat. It's one of the most famous scenes in literary modernism, and it's absolutely central to this argument.
So can you set the scene for us? Who is this guy and what's he doing?
Bergat is an older, celebrated writer. He is great in the eyes of society. He has built his monument. But he's ill, he's dying. He drags himself out of his sickbed to go to an art exhibition because he wants to see one specific painting one last time. It's Vermeer's view of Delft.
Which is a massive, complex cityscape. A very big picture kind of painting.
It is. It's a painting of a whole city. It has history, architecture, people, water, the sky. It is a whole. But when Bergat gets there, he doesn't look at the city. He doesn't care about the composition or the historical context. He becomes obsessed, completely hypnotized by one tiny, seemingly insignificant detail.
The little patch of yellow wall.
That's it, a little patch of yellow wall, just a single dab of yellow paint. And as he stands there, staring at this yellow patch, he has this devastating epiphany. He realizes that his own books, his great works, are dry and dead compared to that little patch of yellow.
Well, what's wrong with his books?
He says his books were too constructed, too logical. They were all about building a whole. But the yellow patch, he says it has a spontaneity. It is self-sufficient. It exists for its own sake. It's perfect in its smallness.
And then he dies.
He collapses and dies right there on the spot. But he dies having realized that the small, that tiny innocent dab of paint, was superior to the big, his entire monumental career.
What did that yellow patch offer him at the moment of his death that his entire life's work didn't?
Innocence. An escape. That patch of yellow wasn't trying to teach anyone a lesson. It wasn't trying to be famous or important. It was just vibrating with its own yellowness. The text would say it was immanent. It was staying within itself. By focusing on it, Bergat was trying to unknow the heavy, violent, meaning-laden world he had lived in. He was using the small detail to escape the burden of context.
So it's a form of escapism, but at a molecular level. You're not escaping to a tropical island. You're escaping into a single color.
Precisely. And this whole system operates on what we could call the text's governing law. If this were a video game, this would be the physics engine. It's called the economy of resentment.
The economy of resentment. That sounds like a physics engine for social interaction. How does it work?
It's based on something like the conservation of violence. If you project greatness out into the world, the universe, or more accurately, society, projects envy and attack back at you in equal measure.
The tall poppy gets cut down.
It's more active and inevitable than that. It's presented as a law of nature. Nietzsche is quoted in the text, and it's a quote that really turns our usual understanding of him on its head. We usually think of Nietzsche as the Superman guy, the will to power, all that.
Yeah, I picture him shouting from a mountaintop about being great.
But listen to what he says here. If someone aspires to greatness, he thereby betrays himself. The most substantial of men aspire to smallness.
Wait, the most substantial men aspire to smallness? That feels like a complete contradiction.
Not if you understand the economy of resentment. If you are truly substantial, if you are truly wise, you understand that greatness is a trap. It makes you a target for everyone else's resentment. So the smartest move, the most substantial move, is to hide your substance. It is to shrink.
And this brings us to the ultimate practitioner of this strategy, Franz Kafka.
Kafka is the patron saint of the small, the absolute master of shrinkage.
Most people know Kafka from The Metamorphosis, the guy who wakes up as a giant bug. Usually we interpret that as a total nightmare. Oh no, I'm a bug. This is the worst thing that could ever happen.
Right. It's seen as a story about alienation and horror.
But the text seems to argue that Kafka, on some level, kind of wanted to be the bug.
Well, let's think about Kafka's actual life. He lived under the oppressive shadow of his father, Hermann Kafka. His father was a brute, a big, loud, physically imposing man, a great figure in his own household.
A tyrant.
A tyrant.
Yeah.
And Kafka was sensitive, frail, intellectual. He couldn't fight his father head on. He couldn't win a physical battle or shouting match. So what was his only available strategy?
He shrank.
He trained himself to disappear. The text calls this the mechanism of shrinkage. The bug in the story isn't just a victim. The bug is a survivor. If you are an insect, you can crawl into the cracks in the wall where the giant's boot can't fit.
The text uses that other great image, the hedgehog.
Yes, the fragment is a hedgehog.
I love that image. It's so perfect.
It is, isn't it? What does a hedgehog do when it's threatened? It doesn't draw a sword. It doesn't give a grand speech about its rights. It just rolls into a ball.
It becomes a sphere of spikes, a perimeter of no.
A perimeter of no. I love that phrasing. You can't argue with a hedgehog. You can't exploit a hedgehog. It has removed itself from the economy of resentment by becoming a useless, painful, self-contained ball.
So shrinking, becoming the bug, the hedgehog, the detail, is a way to achieve what the text calls, in another great phrase, omnipotence without effort.
That's a phrase borrowed from Freud, and it sounds like a paradox. Usually, omnipotence, all power, requires the maximum possible effort. You have to conquer the world to be all-powerful.
Right. You have to raise armies, build empires.
But Freud connects this idea to the mood of our childhood, to the figure he calls His Majesty the Baby.
His Majesty the Baby. I know a few toddlers who definitely fit that title.
Exactly. Think about a baby. A baby is physically small. It's helpless. And yet, in its own world, it is the absolute center of the universe. It commands attention without speaking. It gets fed without hunting. It's omnipotent precisely because it is small and helpless. Its smallness forces the big world to care for it, or at least to leave it alone.
So by retreating into the small, by becoming the baby or the hedgehog, we are trying to reclaim that primordial safety. We're trying to exit the violent adult world of responsibility and competition.
Yes. Fighting the whole, fighting the state, fighting history, that takes a massive expenditure of energy. Being a hedgehog takes none. You just roll up.
Okay, so we've got the friction, which is the fear of the big, and we have the blueprint, which is to shrink to survive. But this text isn't just a collection of abstract ideas. It gives us a very specific vocabulary to work with. I want to move into section 3, the lexicon of the absurd. Because if we're going to navigate this strange world of the small, we need the right words. And frankly, Douglas Collins comes up with some incredible terms here.
He really does. He creates a whole lexicon for this battlefield of the tiny.
Let's start with the one that I think is the foundation for this entire aesthetic, nanoaesthetics.
Nanoaesthetics.
Now, in a tech context, this would mean, building tiny robots. But here, what are we talking about?
We are talking about the art of making things tiny, specifically so they don't get beaten up by history. The text defines it through a fascinating medical metaphor. It is hemophobic art.
Hemophobic. Hemo, blood. Phobic, fear. So art that is afraid of blood.
Exactly. Big art. Think of statues of generals on horseback, or epic war movies, or grand historical novels. That art is hemophilic. It loves blood. It draws its energy from conflict and history and sacrifice. Nanoaesthetics is art that is terrified of blood. It shrinks down to avoid violence at all costs.
So if I decide to paint a tiny, delicate watercolor of a teacup, that is a hemophobic act.
Yes. You are creating what the text calls a charismatic disincentive. You're trying to make the object so small, so domestic, so fragile that no one in their right mind would ever dream of attacking it. Who declares war on a teacup?
It's the "don't hit me, I'm wearing glasses" strategy of art history.
That is a very, very apt way to put it. And remember the Malraux quote we started with, "The trembling of a branch against the sky is more important than Hitler." That is the absolute manifesto of nanoaesthetics. The branch is hemophobic. Hitler is hemophilic.
Got it. Okay, next term. This one stumped me for a second when I first read it. Ropography. R-H-O-P-O-G-R-A-P-H-Y. Sounds like a geography of ropes or something.
It does, yeah, but the root is Greek. Ropos. It means trivial items, wares, but also, more bluntly, trash.
So ropography is the depiction of dirt, scraps, leftovers, and garbage.
Yes, literally painting trash.
Okay, why on earth would anyone want to look at paintings of garbage?
Because garbage is safe. Think about it from the perspective of this text. A painting of a hero is dangerous. He has an ideology. He makes demands on you. A painting of a saint is dangerous. He demands you change your life. But a lemon peel on a table, a broken piece of glass, a worm.
They demand nothing from you.
They demand nothing. And more importantly, they have no master narrative. A shard of glass doesn't belong to the state. It's just debris. The text talks about creating a constellation of smalls, little wheels, nails, refuters.
Yeah.
By choosing to focus on the trash, you are effectively a conscientious objector in the war of meaning.
So you're rejecting megalography, grand history painting.
That's the term for its opposite, yes. The text has this great quote from the philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy. He says, "The scraps, refuse, shards, shreds, remainders, leftovers, rubbish, the excrements of which contemporary art is full."
It's funny because if you go to a modern art museum today, you see this everywhere. Piles of candy on the floor, random objects scattered about. I always just thought it was artists being weird or provocative. But you're saying it's a deep-seated political stance.
It is a political stance of anti-politics. It's an artist saying, I refuse to paint a king or a president. I will paint this discarded candy wrapper instead because the candy wrapper is innocent and the king is not.
I feel like I finally understand a huge chunk of modern art. It's just strategic cowardice.
Or strategic wisdom. It really depends on how much you fear the guillotine.
Fair point. Okay, on to the next concept. This one feels more psychological. The envious superego.
Yes. This is the internal police force that maintains this whole system.
So we know the superego from Freud. It's kind of the dad in your head, the voice of society, telling you to follow the rules. But why is it envious?
Because in this framework, society, the many, fundamentally hates anyone who stands out. It resents greatness. The envy superego is the collective resentment of the masses, internalized. It wants to level everything down.
It's the crab bucket mentality. If one crab tries to climb out, all the other crabs pull it back down.
That is a perfect analogy for it. So choosing to be small isn't just a personal choice for safety. It's a constant negotiation with this envious superego. The text has this incredibly dense lightning strike of a sentence to define it.
Oh boy. Okay, hit me with it.
A small is always the sign of a splitting of a difference. Mediation, either of the self-love that was the torpor of the compact many, or that of the invulnerably animated one.
Okay, lead architect, you have to translate that for us. Splitting the difference, what does that mean?
It means you're striking a deal with your own ambition and with society's envy. On some level, you have an ego. You want to be special. That's the invulnerably animated one. The god, the rock star, the hero.
The one who stands out.
Right. But you know that if you act like a god, the envious superego, the crab bucket, will destroy you. On the other hand, you don't want to be just another anonymous sheep. That's the torpor of the compact many. That's boring. It's a kind of death in itself.
So you can't be a god, and you don't want to be a sheep, so you split the difference.
You become the small, you become quirky, you become niche. You aren't a god, but you aren't a sheep either. You are a hedgehog. You get to have a little bit of self-love, a little bit of distinctness, but not enough to trigger the alarm bells of the envious superego.
You fly under the radar, you're cool, but not too cool. You're successful, but you're always very humble about it.
It's a survival camouflage for the ego.
And this leads to the final term in our lexicon, which I think is the mechanism that keeps this camouflage working. Immanence. Now, in philosophy, this is usually contrasted with transcendence. Transcendence is about going up, out, beyond yourself, looking at God, looking at the big picture.
Right. And in this text, transcendence is dangerous. It leads to totality, to the violence of the whole. Immanence is the opposite. It means staying inside the object, inside the moment, inside your lane.
The text calls it a minder, like a babysitter for your perception.
It's a minder that prevents the small from accidentally becoming big. Because that's the real risk, isn't it? What if your small, quirky indie band suddenly becomes a massive global phenomenon?
Then you become the thing you're hated. You've become the agagonist, the big thing.
Exactly. Immanence is the principle that keeps it locked down. It's the voice that insists that the detail is just a detail. It refuses to let your eye wander up from the patch of yellow wall to the whole sky. The text calls this the perfect crime.
The perfect crime. How so?
It says, the small, now the perfect crime, achieves the status of resident rather than excludable alien.
That's a fascinating way to put it. If you're transcendent, you're an alien. You're outside the system, judging it or trying to change it, and you're a threat. But if you are immanent, you're a resident, you belong here, you're not a problem.
You are safe from deportation by the reality police because you aren't causing a scene. You are just quietly, intently examining your little patch of yellow wall.
Okay, so let's just recap where we are. We have a world where big equals violence, so we shrink.
Right.
We practice nano-aesthetics. We paint trash instead of heroes. We act like hedgehogs to avoid envy. We stay in our lane, immanence to stay safe. And, it sounds peaceful.
It does sound peaceful.
It sounds like a nice life, actually. Gardening, hobbies, mindful appreciation of the little things, no stress.
It feels like freedom.
But, and this is the big but of the entire deep dive, we are now entering section 4, the intellectual aftershock. Because the text pulls the rug out from under us in the final stretch, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. All that safety comes at a very high price.
So there's a hallucination described in the text. It's an image from the poet Masset. I want you, the listener, to try this on for a second. Imagine you are a bee.
The bee in the infinite flower field.
You are a bee. You're flying over a field that never, ever ends. And it is filled not just with flowers, but with an infinity of tiny, beautiful objects. All the things we've been talking about. Little patches of yellow, shrimps.
Pebbles, the constellation of smalls.
And you just flit from one to the other. You land on a flower, you drink the nectar for a second, then you fly to the next one. You never stop. And very importantly, you never build a hive.
Why no hive?
Because the hive is the state. The hive is a collective project. The hive is big. And you never sting anyone.
Because stinging is violence. Stinging is engaging in the blood debt of history.
You just consume. You just take little thrills one after another forever.
What thrill?
Now, when I first read this part, I thought, that sounds great. That sounds like paradise. No responsibility. Just an endless buffet of tiny snacks and beautiful things. But then the expert speaker inside my head, you started whispering to me, this sounds familiar.
It should sound very, very familiar to anyone living in the 21st century with a smartphone in their pocket.
This is the internet. This is scrolling through a social media feed. This is the algorithm.
The text argues, and this is the absolutely devastating twist, that this freedom of the small, this aesthetic rebellion against the big, is actually the operating logic of the market.
The market. Capitalism.
Yes. Think about it. The small is the perfect consumer unit. If you are obsessed with if you're on a quest for the ultimate answer or total satisfaction or God, you are a terrible customer.
Because if I find the ultimate answer, I stop shopping. My quest is over.
Exactly. If you find God or the revolution, you stop needing to buy the next little thing to fill the void. But if your entire life is built on nano-aesthetics, on the appreciation of an infinite series of tiny, fleeting details, you will need an infinite supply of them.
I need a new phone case. Then I need a new app. Then I need to see a 15-second video of a cat. Then I need to see a 15-second video of a guy cutting a bar of soap. Then another one and another one.
Those are the little thrills. The text calls this a kindler, gentler negativity, instead of the religious horror of damnation, which is a big, terrifying, life-changing feeling. You just get shopper's remorse.
Which is a tiny, manageable, and ultimately trivial feeling. Oh, I bought the wrong soap. Oh, well, I'll buy a different one tomorrow.
The market loves the hedgehog. It loves the bee. It wants you to be a sleepless bee, constantly moving from product to product, from fragment to fragment, never building a hive, and never ever stinging the hand that feeds you the little thrills.
So this entire philosophy, this whole intellectual tradition from Adorno and the French theorists, this powerful idea that smallness is a rebellion against the power structure, it was all a trap, or at least it was co-opted.
It was captured. The text suggests that the free market stole the small. It took the hedgehog strategy, which was originally conceived as a desperate tactic for survival against tyranny, and it turned it into a business model. It turned us all into restless, anxious consumers of details.
That is incredibly depressing.
It is, but it's also a brilliant diagnosis of our current moment. It explains why so many of us feel so busy all the time, but achieve so little of substance. We are, and this is maybe the best line in the whole text, narcissistic in just too many places at once.
That's the one. Narcissism in just too many places at once.
Instead of one big narcissism, the narcissism of the emperor who says, I'm the state, we have a million little narcissisms. I like this specific brand of coffee. I curate this specific online feed. I have this unique collection of hobbies.
It allows us to feel special and unique without ever taking any of the risks associated with being truly great or truly different.
It solves Freud's central problem from his book Civilization and its discontents. Freud said civilization makes us unhappy because we have to suppress our aggressive, narcissistic instincts to live together.
Right. We have to form a hive.
Well, the market solved it. It didn't suppress our instincts, it just chopped them up into tiny, harmless, marketable pieces. We solved the problem of war by turning it into shopping.
We traded Hitler for a really, really well-curated Instagram feed.
That is the trade-off. And the text leaves us with the very uncomfortable question. Is it worth it?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, a curated feed is certainly safer than a world war, but it feels hollow. It feels empty.
It is the hollowness of the fragment when there is no whole to connect to.
So if we were trying to pitch this deep dive to someone to explain why this matters right now, I feel like we have three main angles, three viral hooks we could use.
I think the first hook is the most counterintuitive one. It's about the danger of the big picture.
Right. Hook one, why your obsession with the big picture is actually a death wish for your soul. We're all taught to think big, but this text proves that thinking big aligns you with the historical forces that crush humanity. The real wisdom is in looking at the branch, not the dictator.
Then there's the personal strategy angle. Hook 2. The hedgehog strategy. How Kafka used weakness as the ultimate weapon against power. Everyone today wants to be an alpha, a lion. But the true survivor is the hedgehog. The secret is to shrink until they can't hit you anymore.
And then the sting in the tail, the one that hurts. Hook 3. How the free market stole the small to turn you into a sleepless bee. You think you're rebelling against the system by enjoying the little things? No, you're just becoming its perfect customer.
That last one is the one that really keeps me up at night. The idea that our refuge has become our cage.
So where does this leave us? We've dismantled greatness. We've learned the strategy of shrinking. But we've also learned that shrinking is just another way of buying into a different, maybe more insidious system. Is there a final word? A parting shot from the text that sums it all up.
The text ends on a note of deep ambivalence. It doesn't offer an easy answer, but there is one sentence that I think captures the attitude of the modern small subject perfectly. It says, "The small means never having to say you're sorry, a narcissism in just too many places at once."
The small means never having to say you're sorry.
Think about it. If you are big, you are responsible. If the empire fails, if the company goes bankrupt, it's your fault. You have to answer for it. But if you are just a fragment, if you are just a consumer, flitting from one thing to the next, you are innocent. You are never responsible for the whole.
You can just say, hey, I'm just a guy. I'm just living my life. I didn't make the rules.
Exactly. But in doing so, you disperse your narcissism everywhere, like a fine mist. You engage in a soft, ubiquitous, and ultimately unaccountable selfishness.
The selfishness of the harmless.
Yes. The tyranny of the tiny.
Wow. This has been, well, I was going to say massive, but I suppose the more appropriate word would be significantly minute.
We have certainly mapped the battlefield of the tiny, and it's a much bigger battlefield than it looks.
So, to our listener, you now know that small is not weak. It is a strategic bunker. It is a blockade against the infinite invasion of history. But be careful.
Yes. Be very careful that your bunker doesn't become a shopping mall, and be careful that in your refusal to be a hero, you don't lose the ability to stand for anything at all.
You have received your belief on demand. Go forth and shrink.
Go forth and shrink.